Most people know Aerosmith as rock legends with hits like Dream On and Walk This Way. But behind the scenes lurk tales that would make even their wildest songs seem tame. From lawsuits against their own drummer to earning more from a video game than their albums, from narrowly avoiding a deadly plane crash to Steven Tyler's peculiar teenage theft, the Boston Bad Boys have lived through decades of jaw-dropping incidents that reveal just how strange rock stardom can get. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Aerosmith. Fact 1. Guitar Hero earned more than all albums combined. When it comes to making money in the music industry, Aerosmith discovered something that would have seemed impossible just a few decades earlier. The legendary rock band actually earned more money from a single video game than they did from any of their platinum-selling albums throughout their entire career. This surprising revelation came straight from Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision, the company behind the massively popular Guitar Hero franchise. In 2008, Activision released Guitar Hero: Aerosmith, a special edition of their hit music video game that focused entirely on the Boston Rockers. The game featured 29 of Aerosmith's classic songs, allowing players to pretend they were shredding guitar solos alongside Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. What made this deal particularly lucrative for the band was that they didn't just license their music, they also provided their likenesses, participated in motion capture sessions, and even re-recorded 4 songs, specifically for the game. The numbers tell an incredible story about how the music industry was changing. Guitar Hero: Aerosmith sold over 567,000 copies in its first week alone, bringing in more than $25 million. Within 3 months, those numbers had doubled, with over 1 million copies sold and more than $50 million in total sales. By 2010, the game had moved over 3.6 million units worldwide. To put this in perspective, even Aerosmith's most successful albums rarely generated this kind of direct revenue for the band. Traditional album sales meant sharing profits with record labels, distributors, and retailers, leaving the artists with a much smaller slice of the pie. But the Guitar Hero deal was structured as a licensing agreement that gave Aerosmith a much larger percentage of the profits. Kotick explained the video game didn't just generate massive immediate revenue for Aerosmith, it also boosted their merchandise sales, concert ticket sales, and even helped them negotiate better contracts for future projects. The band saw a 40% increase in their catalog sales in the weeks following the game's release, proving that the video game actually drove people back to their original music. This financial success story became a blueprint for how veteran rock acts could reinvent their revenue streams in the digital age, showing that sometimes the most unexpected partnerships could be the most profitable. Fact 2. Nearly died in Lynyrd Skynyrd's fatal plane. In 1977, Aerosmith came terrifyingly close to boarding the exact same airplane that would later crash and kill 3 members of Lynyrd Skynyrd, but a last-minute decision based on the flight crew's unprofessional behavior may have saved their lives. The band was looking to charter a plane for their upcoming Draw the Line tour when they were offered a Convair CV-240, the same aircraft that would become infamous just months later. Steven Tyler and Joe Perry were initially excited about renting this particular plane and put considerable pressure on their management to make the deal happen. However, Aerosmith's assistant chief of flight operations, a man named Zunk Booker, was sent to inspect the aircraft before any final agreements were signed. What Booker witnessed during his inspection immediately raised serious red flags about both the plane's condition and the professionalism of its crew. According to Aerosmith's official band autobiography, Booker observed the 2 pilots, Walter McCreary and William Gray, casually passing a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey back and forth while they were supposed to be preparing the aircraft for inspection. This shocking display of drinking on duty, combined with Booker's concerns about the overall condition of the 30-year-old plane, convinced him to strongly recommend against hiring this particular aircraft. Despite Tyler and Perry's enthusiasm for the deal, Booker put his foot down and refused to approve the plane for Aerosmith's use. His professional assessment was that neither the aircraft nor its crew met the safety standards that a major rock band should expect when traveling. The band ultimately listened to their flight operations expert and decided to look for alternative transportation for their tour. Just a few months later, on October 20th, 1977, that same Convair CV-240 took off from Greenville, South Carolina, carrying Lynyrd Skynyrd to what was supposed to be a concert in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The plane ran out of fuel and crashed in a wooded area near Gillsburg, Mississippi, killing lead singer Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, backup singer Cassie Gaines, and 3 others. The same pilots that Bucher had seen drinking during his inspection were among those who died in the crash. Joe Perry later reflected that he felt someone was watching over Aerosmith during this close call, crediting their flight operations team with potentially saving their lives. Fact 3. Drummer sued his own band for Grammy ban. In one of the most unusual legal battles in rock history, Aerosmith's founding drummer Joey Kramer actually sued his own bandmates in January 2020 after they prevented him from performing at the Grammy Awards and other major events. The bizarre situation began when Kramer suffered minor shoulder injuries in April 2019, forcing him to step away from the band's Las Vegas residency shows while he recovered. When Kramer felt ready to return to performing later that year, he discovered that his bandmates had serious doubts about whether he was physically and emotionally prepared to play at their usual professional level. Rather than simply welcoming him back as they had done with other members who had faced health issues over the decades, the band made an unprecedented decision that would ultimately land them all in court. Aerosmith's management told Kramer that he would need to prove he could still play drums at an appropriate level before being allowed to rejoin the group. This meant Kramer had to essentially audition for his own job by recording himself playing along to a click track while being videotaped, something no other member of the band had ever been required to do in their 50-year history together. Kramer was particularly upset because the band's decision meant he would miss performing at 2 major career milestones that could never be repeated. Aerosmith was scheduled to receive the MusiCares Person of the Year award and perform at the Grammy Awards, where they would also be honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. For a founding member who had dedicated 5 decades of his life to the band, being excluded from these prestigious moments felt deeply unfair. In his lawsuit, Kramer stated that this was not about money, but about being recognized alongside his peers for their collective contributions to music history. He pointed out that other band members, including Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, had faced their own periods of injury, illness, and treatment for addiction without ever being asked to audition before returning to the stage. The band responded by saying that while Kramer was their brother and they cared about his well-being, he had not been emotionally and physically able to perform for the previous 6 months by his own admission. A Massachusetts judge ultimately denied Kramer's request to force the band to let him perform, though he did eventually rejoin them for their Las Vegas shows in February 2020. Fact 4. Fan lawsuit over Hawaiian concert cancellation. Aerosmith found themselves facing an unusual class action lawsuit when devastated fans sued the band for massive travel expenses after a concert cancellation in Maui left hundreds of people stranded with expensive vacation plans and no rock show to attend. The legal drama began when the band was forced to cancel their scheduled performance at the War Memorial Stadium in Maui, leaving their Hawaiian fans feeling both disappointed and financially burned. The concert was originally supposed to take place on September 26th, but Aerosmith couldn't get their equipment and stage set up to the Hawaiian island in time due to scheduling conflicts with their previous show. The band had been scheduled to perform in Chicago on September 10th, but that concert was moved to September 24th, creating a logistical nightmare that made it impossible to transport everything to Maui for the next day's show. While the band blamed unavoidable logistical issues for the cancellation, many fans didn't accept their explanation and felt the reasoning wasn't genuine. The situation was made worse by the fact that many Aerosmith fans had traveled from the mainland United States and other locations specifically to see the band perform in this tropical paradise setting, turning the concert into the centerpiece of expensive vacation plans. Lawyer Brandy Faria led the legal campaign against the band, arguing that fans deserved compensation that went far beyond simple ticket refunds. She estimated that the concert cancellation had cost disappointed fans between $250,000 and $1.5 million in total travel expenses, including flights, hotels, rental cars, and other vacation costs that couldn't be recovered once the show was canceled. Faria also argued that the concert would have provided significant cultural benefits to the island of Maui, suggesting that the cancellation had broader implications beyond just disappointing individual fans. The lawsuit sought to hold Aerosmith financially responsible for all the out-of-pocket expenses that fans had incurred while planning their trips around the concert date. Eventually, Aerosmith reached a settlement with the affected fans in April 2009. The band agreed to compensate all ticket buyers with free tickets to a rescheduled Maui concert that took place on October 20th, 2009, and also provided reimbursements for the various out-of-pocket expenses that fans had suffered due to the original cancellation. Fact 5. Steven Tyler still has stolen school bass. According to rock and roll legend, Steven Tyler still owns a bass guitar that he stole from his high school band during his teenage years, making it one of the longest-running cases of musical instrument theft in rock history. This curious piece of Aerosmith folklore suggests that the future frontman's rebellious streak began long before he became famous for his wild stage antics and outrageous behavior as the lead singer of one of America's most successful rock bands. The story of Tyler's alleged bass guitar theft fits perfectly with his reputation as someone who was willing to break rules and push boundaries from a very early age. During his time at Roosevelt High School in Yonkers, New York, Tyler was already showing signs of the rebellious spirit that would later make him a rock icon, and he was ultimately expelled from the school just before graduation due to marijuana use. While the exact details of how Tyler managed to walk away with the school's bass guitar remain unclear, the fact that this story has persisted for decades suggests it holds at least some truth. Given Tyler's later admission to various wild behaviors during his youth and early career, including his well-documented struggles with substance abuse and his reputation for unpredictable actions, the idea that he would have taken a bass guitar from his school band doesn't seem particularly out of character. What makes this story especially interesting is the suggestion that Tyler has held on to this instrument throughout his entire career, keeping it as some kind of memento from his pre-fame days. If true, this would mean that somewhere in Steven Tyler's collection of musical instruments and rock memorabilia sits a bass guitar that technically belongs to his old high school, representing one of his earliest acts of rock and roll rebellion. The persistence of this legend also speaks to the way that rock fans and music historians love to collect these kinds of colorful stories about their heroes, especially tales that show famous musicians displaying their rebellious tendencies long before they became household names. Whether Tyler actually still has the bass guitar, or whether this is simply one of those rock mythology stories that gets better with each telling, it certainly adds another layer to the larger-than-life persona that has made him one of rock's most enduring characters. Fact 6. Band name came from childhood notebook doodling. The name Aerosmith came from drummer Joey Kramer's habit of absent-mindedly doodling the word in his high school notebooks, long before he ever imagined it would become one of the most recognizable band names in rock history. According to the band's origin story, Kramer had been writing Aerosmith over and over again in his school notebooks during his teenage years, treating it more like an interesting combination of letters than a potential band name. The moment when this notebook scribbling transformed into a band name happened during one of the group's early brainstorming sessions, when the future members of Aerosmith were sitting around trying to come up with something that would work for their new rock group. As with many rock bands of that era, the naming process involved a lot of casual discussion, probably while the guys were hanging out and getting high together, watching reruns of the Three Stooges between more serious conversations about their musical future. During one of these sessions, Kramer mentioned that he had always thought Aerosmith would make a cool name for a band, sharing this word that he had been unconsciously writing in his notebooks for years. However, when he first suggested the name to Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, and the other future band members, they were initially skeptical about the idea, but not for the reasons you might expect. The confusion arose because the other band members thought Kramer was actually saying Aerosmith, which they recognized as the title of a famous book by Sinclair Lewis, the American novelist who won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Since Aerosmith was already associated with this well-known literary work, the band members weren't sure if using a similar-sounding name would be appropriate, or if it might cause legal problems down the road. It took some discussion before Kramer was able to clarify that he was talking about Aerosmith with an E rather than Aerosmith with an Aerosmith, and that this was simply a word he had invented and been writing in his notebooks rather than something borrowed from literature. Once the misunderstanding was cleared up, the band decided that Aerosmith had the right sound and feeling for a rock group, and the name that had started as teenage notebook doodling became the official identity of one of America's greatest rock bands. Fact 7. Only one album without original lineup. Despite having a career that spans more than 5 decades and includes 15 studio albums, Aerosmith has the remarkable distinction of recording only one album without their complete original lineup, making them one of the most stable rock bands in music history. This extraordinary consistency becomes even more impressive when you consider how many other famous rock groups have gone through countless member changes, breakups, and reunions over much shorter periods of time. The single album that broke this pattern was Rockin' a Hard Place, released in 1982 during one of the most turbulent periods in the band's history. By this time, the combination of heavy drug use, creative differences, and personal conflicts had pushed the group to its breaking point, leading to the temporary departure of 2 key members who had been with the band since its formation in 1970. Joe Perry, the lead guitarist and primary songwriting partner with Steven Tyler, had left Aerosmith in 1979 to form his own group called the Joe Perry Project. His departure was followed by rhythm guitarist Brad Whitford, who also decided to pursue other musical opportunities outside of Aerosmith. This left Steven Tyler, bassist Tom Hamilton, and drummer Joey Kramer to carry on with the Aerosmith name while searching for replacement musicians. For Rockin' a Hard Place, the remaining band members brought in guitarist Jimmy Crespo and Rick Dufay to fill the vacant guitar positions. Interestingly, Rick Dufay would later become known as the father of actress Minka Kelly, adding an unexpected Hollywood connection to this chapter of Aerosmith history. Brad Whitford actually quit partway through the recording process, which meant that some songs were recorded with him while others featured his replacement. The album itself reflected the band's fractured state during this period, and while it contained some solid rock tracks, it lacked the chemistry and creative spark that made Aerosmith's classic albums so powerful. The experience of recording without their core songwriting team ultimately reinforced how important the original lineup was to the band's success. By 1984, the original members had worked out their differences and reunited, with Perry and Whitford returning to the fold. From that point forward, Aerosmith has maintained their classic lineup through all their subsequent studio albums, making Rockin' a Hard Place a unique anomaly in their otherwise remarkably consistent band history. Fact 8. Joe Perry started as Steven Tyler's French fry cook. Before Joe Perry became one of rock's most legendary guitarists, he was working as a cook at a New Hampshire restaurant called The Anchorage, where he unknowingly served what Steven Tyler would later describe as the best French fries of his life to his future bandmate and songwriting partner. This culinary encounter happened years before the two musicians would officially meet and form one of the most successful partnerships in rock history. Tyler, who was still a teenager at the time, would regularly visit the Anchorage restaurant with his friends, and he became particularly fond of the French fries that were being prepared in the kitchen by the young cook named Joe Perry. The quality of those fries made such an impression on Tyler that he wanted to meet whoever was making them and compliment the chef on their excellent work in the kitchen. When Tyler finally got the chance to meet the person responsible for his favorite fries, he discovered it was Joe Perry, though their first interaction wasn't exactly the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Perry wasn't particularly happy to meet Tyler and his group of friends because they had developed a reputation as troublesome customers who would regularly throw food around the restaurant and make messes that Perry would have to clean up after they left. This early encounter shows how their relationship started on somewhat rocky ground, with Perry viewing Tyler as just another annoying teenager who made his job more difficult rather than recognizing him as a future musical collaborator. Tyler and his friends apparently had a habit of getting rowdy during their visits to the Anchorage, throwing fries and generally creating chaos that the kitchen staff had to deal with long after the group had moved on to their next destination. It wasn't until several years later, in 1969, that Tyler would see Perry performing with his band called the Jam Band at a local rock show in Sunapee, New Hampshire. During that performance, Tyler was struck by Perry's raw power and attitude as a guitarist, completely forgetting about their earlier encounters at the restaurant. This musical meeting would eventually lead to their decision to form a band together around 1970, with Tyler insisting on being the frontman and Perry taking on lead guitar duties, transforming the French fry cook and his difficult customer into one of rock's most enduring creative partnerships. Fact 9. Tyler's scarves have hidden meaning. Steven Tyler's trademark scarves hanging from his microphone stand became far more than just a decorative stage prop, evolving into one of the most recognizable symbols in rock music that represented his willingness to blur traditional gender lines and embrace a more flamboyant performance style during an era when most rock stars stuck to conventional masculine imagery. These colorful pieces of fabric, which Tyler would attach to his microphone stand and let flow dramatically during performances, became an essential part of his visual identity that helped set him apart from other frontmen of his generation. The scarves served multiple purposes beyond their obvious visual appeal, functioning as an extension of Tyler's theatrical personality and his commitment to putting on a show that was as much about spectacle as it was about music. During live performances, Tyler would often grab these scarves and wave them around, incorporating them into his dance moves and using them to enhance the drama of particularly emotional moments in songs like Dream On or Amazing. What made Tyler's use of scarves particularly significant was how they reflected his broader approach to challenging rock and roll's traditional masculine image during the 1970s and 80s. At a time when most male rock stars were focused on projecting tough, hypermasculine personas, Tyler was comfortable incorporating elements that might be considered feminine or androgynous, including his use of makeup, his flowing hair, and of course, his collection of colorful scarves. The scarves also became a practical tool for Tyler's incredibly physical stage performances, which often included acrobatic moves, dancing, and his famous high kicks. The flowing fabric added visual movement to his already dynamic stage presence, creating trails of color that followed his movements and made his performances even more visually striking for audiences, both in person and watching on television. Over the decades, Tyler's scarves became so closely associated with his image that they appeared in countless photographs, music videos, and live recordings, cementing their place as one of rock's most distinctive visual trademarks. The scarves represented Tyler's understanding that being a great frontman meant more than just singing well, requiring a complete visual package that would make audiences remember not just the music, but the entire experience of watching Aerosmith perform live. Fact 10. Dream On. Rejected by Joe Perry initially. One of Aerosmith's most beloved and enduring songs almost didn't make it onto their debut album because lead guitarist Joe Perry initially rejected Dream On, thinking that ballads simply weren't cool enough for a serious hard rock band that was trying to establish itself as a high-energy live act. Perry's resistance to the song reveals how differently the band members viewed their musical direction during their early years, when they were still figuring out what kind of rock group they wanted to become. Perry's objection to Dream On stemmed from his belief that rock and roll was fundamentally about energy, power, and putting on an electrifying show that would get audiences excited and moving. In his mind, slow ballads didn't fit with the image he wanted Aerosmith to project, which was more focused on the kind of driving, aggressive rock music that would make their mark in live venues and establish them as a force to be reckoned with in the competitive music scene of the early 1970s. According to Perry's own recollections, he felt that back in those days, bands made their reputation primarily through live performances rather than radio play or album sales. And ballads simply didn't showcase the kind of musicianship and energy that would impress audiences at rock clubs and concert venues. He was particularly concerned that Dream On didn't demonstrate the guitar-driven sound that he believed should be the centerpiece of Aerosmith's musical identity. Perry later admitted in interviews that he didn't really appreciate the musical complexity and emotional depth of Dream On until much later in his career, acknowledging that his initial focus on raw energy and showmanship had prevented him from recognizing the song's potential as a showcase for Steven Tyler's remarkable vocal range and the band's ability to create more nuanced, atmospheric music. The irony of Perry's initial rejection becomes even more apparent when you consider that Dream On eventually became one of Aerosmith's signature songs and helped establish them as a band capable of both hard-hitting rock anthems and more introspective, emotionally powerful ballads. The song's success proved that audiences were hungry for exactly the kind of musical diversity that Perry had initially worried would dilute their rock credibility, showing how wrong even talented musicians can be when predicting what will resonate with fans. Fact 11. Massachusetts has official Aerosmith Day. The state of Massachusetts has officially designated a special day to honor Aerosmith, making the band one of the few rock groups in American history to receive this level of formal recognition from their home state government. This official celebration acknowledges not just the band's massive commercial success and cultural impact, but also their deep roots in the Boston area and their role in putting Massachusetts on the map as a significant center for rock music. The creation of Aerosmith Day represents the state's recognition that the band has served as important cultural ambassadors for Massachusetts, helping to establish the region's reputation as a breeding ground for innovative rock music that could compete with scenes in cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Nashville. Throughout their career, Aerosmith has consistently identified themselves as a Boston band, never forgetting their origins even as they achieved international superstardom. This official recognition is particularly meaningful when you consider how closely tied Aerosmith's identity has always been to the Boston area. From their early days living together in a cramped apartment at 1325 Commonwealth Avenue, to their countless performances at local venues that helped build their reputation before they signed with a major record label. The band's connection to Massachusetts goes beyond just geography, as their blue-collar work ethic and no-nonsense attitude reflected the values of their home region. The state's decision to create an official day honoring the band also reflects Aerosmith's economic impact on Massachusetts, as their success has brought tourism, media attention, and cultural prestige to the region. Over the course of more than 5 decades, fans from around the world have visited Boston specifically because of its connection to Aerosmith, contributing to the local economy and helping to establish the city as an important destination for rock music tourism. Having an official state day puts Aerosmith in very exclusive company, as most states reserve this type of recognition for historical figures, important events, or causes, rather than entertainment acts. The fact that Massachusetts chose to honor a rock band in this way demonstrates how seriously the state takes Aerosmith's contributions to both music and Massachusetts culture, treating them as more than just entertainers, but as genuine cultural icons who have helped shape the state's modern identity. Fact 12. Tyler collapsed on stage multiple times. Steven Tyler's struggles with drug addiction reached a terrifying public low point in 1980, when he collapsed on stage during a concert in Portland, Maine, and was unable to get back up for the rest of the show, creating a shocking moment that demonstrated just how severely his substance abuse problems were affecting his ability to perform. This dramatic incident marked one of the most visible examples of how Tyler's addiction had spiraled out of control, turning what should have been a routine concert into a medical emergency that left fans and bandmates deeply concerned about his health and survival. The Portland collapse wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the most serious in a series of troubling episodes that had been building throughout the late 1970s. As Tyler's drug use intensified alongside his fame and the pressures of constant touring. During this period, Tyler and Joe Perry had earned the nickname the Toxic Twins because of their legendary intake of stimulants and heroin, which had become so notorious within the music industry that it overshadowed their musical accomplishments. The severity of Tyler's condition during this era was further highlighted by another incident at a homecoming arena show in Worcester, Massachusetts, where both Tyler and Perry got high backstage before taking the stage, resulting in Tyler being so intoxicated that he collapsed during the performance yet again. These public breakdowns were particularly devastating because they occurred in front of audiences who had paid to see their rock heroes perform, only to witness the frightening reality of addiction playing out in real time. Tyler's drug problems during this period were so severe that they affected not just his stage performances, but also his songwriting abilities and his relationships with his bandmates, contributing to the tensions that would eventually lead to Joe Perry's departure from the band in 1979. The financial cost of his addiction was equally staggering, with Tyler later reflecting that he had made around $4 or $5 million by 1979, but had lost it all by 1983 due to his substance abuse. These collapse incidents served as wake-up calls that ultimately helped Tyler recognize the need to get clean, though it would take several more years before he successfully completed a drug rehabilitation program in the mid-1980s and began the long process of rebuilding both his health and his career. Fact 13. 9 Lives album cover caused religious controversy. Aerosmith found themselves at the center of an unexpected religious controversy in 1997, when the original album cover for their 9 Lives release sparked outrage from Hindu communities around the world, forcing the band and their record company to issue public apologies and completely redesign the artwork before the album could be widely distributed. The problematic image depicted a figure that appeared to be the Hindu deity Lord Krishna, but with the head of a cat replacing the god's traditional human features, creating what many Hindus viewed as a deeply offensive distortion of their sacred religious imagery. The controversial artwork had been created by artist Stefan Sagmeister, who had taken inspiration from traditional Hindu religious art, but altered it by giving the dancing figure a cat's head instead of maintaining the original divine representation. The image specifically referenced a popular episode from Hindu mythology, where Lord Krishna dances on the head of the snake demon Aghasura, which was a story that Sagmeister remembered from his own childhood, and thought would make interesting visual art for the album cover. What made the situation particularly problematic was that neither Aerosmith nor their record label had been aware of the religious significance of the imagery when they approved the artwork for production. The band had simply thought the image looked visually striking and fit with the 9 Lives theme, without realizing they were using and modifying sacred Hindu religious iconography in a way that would be considered disrespectful by practitioners of the faith. Once Hindu groups and religious leaders began voicing their concerns about the offensive nature of the artwork, explaining how the cat-headed version of Lord Krishna was seen as a mockery of their religious beliefs, Aerosmith and their record company quickly realized the seriousness of the situation. The band issued a formal apology, acknowledging that they had been unaware of the religious context and expressing regret for any offense caused to the Hindu community. The record company moved quickly to recall the original album covers and replace them with a revised version that removed the controversial religious imagery entirely. This incident served as an important lesson for the music industry about the need to research and understand cultural and religious references before incorporating them into commercial artwork, especially when dealing with sacred imagery from world religions. Fact 14. First band inducted to Hall of Fame with active chart song. Unique distinction in music history. When they became the only band ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, while simultaneously having a song actively climbing the charts, creating a remarkable moment that highlighted their unusual ability to remain commercially relevant decades after their initial rise to fame. This extraordinary timing occurred during their 2001 induction ceremony, when their hit single Jaded was sitting comfortably in the top 10 of the Billboard charts at the exact same time they were being honored for their lifetime contributions to rock music. The significance of this achievement becomes more apparent when you consider that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame typically inducts artists after their most commercially successful periods have ended, usually recognizing musicians for their historical impact rather than their current chart performance. Most bands and artists receive this honor well after their hit-making days are behind them, making Aerosmith's situation virtually unprecedented in the Hall of Fame's history. Jaded was the lead single from Aerosmith's 13th studio album, Just Push Play, which had been released in March 2001, just weeks before their Hall of Fame induction ceremony took place in late March of the same year. The song's success demonstrated that Aerosmith had managed to maintain their ability to create radio-friendly hits that could compete with much younger artists on contemporary rock charts, something that very few bands from their era had been able to accomplish. The timing of these two events created a perfect storm of recognition for the band, as they were simultaneously being celebrated for their past achievements, while also proving that they remained a vital creative force in current popular music. This dual recognition highlighted Aerosmith's remarkable longevity and their ability to evolve with changing musical trends without abandoning the core sound that had made them famous in the first place. The fact that Jaded was performing so well on the charts during their induction also served as proof that Aerosmith's Hall of Fame recognition wasn't just a nostalgic acknowledgement of their 70s and 80s glory days, but rather a celebration of a band that was still actively contributing to rock music and finding new audiences more than 30 years after they first formed in Boston. Fact 15. Tyler fell off stage during Guitar Hero Tour. On August 5, 2009, Steven Tyler suffered a serious fall off the stage during an Aerosmith concert near Sturgis, South Dakota, creating a dramatic incident that temporarily cast doubt on the future of one of America's most enduring rock bands. The accident occurred while Aerosmith was touring to promote their hugely successful Guitar Hero video game, which had become one of their most profitable ventures and had introduced their music to an entirely new generation of fans who were experiencing the band through this interactive gaming format. Tyler's fall was particularly concerning because of his age and the severity of his injuries, as the 61-year-old frontman was immediately rushed to a local hospital, where doctors assessed the damage from his tumble off the stage. The incident highlighted the physical risks that aging rock stars face when they continue to perform the kind of high-energy, acrobatic stage shows that had made them famous decades earlier, especially when dealing with Tyler's famously athletic performance style that included dancing, jumping, and moving energetically across the stage. The timing of the accident was especially problematic because Aerosmith was in the middle of what was being called the Guitar Hero Aerosmith Tour, which was designed to capitalize on the massive success of their video game and introduce their classic songs to younger audiences who might not have been familiar with their extensive catalog of hits. The tour was an important part of their strategy to remain relevant in an increasingly youth-oriented music industry, making Tyler's injury a significant setback for the band's commercial plans. Following the accident, there was considerable uncertainty about whether Tyler would be able to recover sufficiently to continue performing at the level that Aerosmith fans expected, and media reports began speculating about the possibility that this incident might mark the end of the band's touring career. The fall also raised questions about Tyler's overall health, and whether the physical demands of performing with Aerosmith were becoming too much for someone who had already survived decades of hard living and previous health scares. By November 2009, the situation had become even more complicated when media outlets reported that Tyler had lost contact with his bandmates and that the other members of Aerosmith were unsure whether he was still committed to continuing with the group, creating a period of genuine uncertainty about the band's future.